Hello, I'm Dr. Ricardo Quintero, and I'm here to share with you some information with regard to how we can move towards positive mental health as professionals, especially those of us that work in the nonprofit sector. Before we actually delve into the work at hand, I want to discuss some things that are really true in 2025 about working with nonprofit organizations. So we know that nonprofits continue to reach and impact a staggering number of people. And for example, the Salvation Army serves about 28 million people annually in the United States. They provide more than 183 million meals and disaster assistance to over 300,000 persons each year. Now we're also getting national recognition for the important work we do as nonprofit organizations. For example, AARP was named the Nonprofit of the Year by the Anthem Awards for their social impact with older Americans. And then as we move forward with the work that we're doing and trying to help various communities in various ways, we know that we must show resilience by investing in our future. A 2025 survey, for example, found that 74% are increasing spending on technology, with about 97% of us using AI, and an 88% plan to shift and to expand their mission to meet the evolving community needs, meaning that we need to leverage technology in any way that we can in order for us to truly begin to meet some of the very specific needs of our community members. It's also true that many of us who decide to work for nonprofit agencies, we typically have an empathetic nature. And because we have this empathetic nature, we need to practice self-care. So we have an obligation to present our best selves to the beneficiaries of our services, and we can only do so if we take time to care for ourselves. So with that idea in mind, I'd like you all to pause this, to go to this URL, and this URL will bring up a survey for you to see where you test on the empathy uh, on the empathy test. For example, here, the empathy test score of 92 was granted to me after I took it. This is kind of a snapshot of who we are at this moment. So go ahead and pause this video and take this. And it's just to give yourself some information about your empathetic nature. Well, depending on how we scored, you saw that I scored a 92. I also need to bear in mind that the important work that we do can lead to negative consequences if we're not careful. I know that empathy, burnout, compassion, fatigue, and emotional dysregulation can run counter to the work that I want to do and the work that your organization may want to do. And it can negatively impact the interactions with the communities that you serve. So, empathy, burnout, and compassion fatigue are increasingly common experiences for helping professionals as the emotional labor of our work takes its toll. It's important for us to understand and reckon with the fact that the dynamics of an emotional capacity and self-care and resilience is really key to addressing these challenges. So, what exactly is empathy burnout and compassion fatigue? Well, empathy burnout is, as it says, it's the emotional and physical. This is important. It's not strictly emotional. It's the emotional and physical depletion that comes from constantly being attuned to the suffering of others. Compassion fatigue is the gradual lessening of compassion over time due to the demands of providing care and support. Those of us who have empathetic natures, we really overextend ourselves sometimes, and we really don't take the time that we need to fill our tank and to help ourselves be cared for. The impact of emotional labor has, according to what I've read, um, an impact, and it can have emotional demands because we know that helping professionals must constantly manage their own emotions and those of their peers and their clients. Sometimes in organizations or in the community where we work, workers often lack and have limited opportunities to process the emotional toll of their work. Meaning that if you're not in supervision as a mental health care provider and you're working in nonprofit sectors, Really don't seek out oftentimes places where you can process what you're going through with other persons who might understand your position and look at the problem through the same lens as yours. And then, unfortunately, there are workplace cultures and communities that do not prioritize employee well-being. And this also can exacerbate the problem. And so we need to be wary of these things, aware of them, and make sure that we find positive ways to mitigate these circumstances. The symptoms of empathy, burnout, and compassion fatigue are as follows. The physical symptoms often are exhaustion, just feeling tired, not rested even after you've had a good night's sleep, headaches, including migraines, insomnia, not being able to fall asleep or stay asleep, and a weakened immune system. That means like catching viruses very frequently and always seeming to have a cough. These can be some symptoms of empathy, burnout, and compassion fatigue. Also, emotional symptoms like detachment, cynicism, irritability, and decreased job satisfaction can also be signs of empathy, burnout, and compassion fatigue. And unfortunately, these sets of problems can lead to behavioral symptoms such as avoidance of clients and of peers and of stakeholders, and just having overall decreased productivity and an increase in absenteeism. It's important for us to kind of look at this and strategize this in a way that is that we can grasp more easily. And I like this rain barrel theory. And this theory says that we are all a rain barrel, essentially, and that we each have a finite capacity for rain in our barrel. Otherwise, it begins to spill over. And so inputs and outputs are happening with the work that we do all day with our families of origin, our communities, even sometimes when it's not part of our work. And each one of these situations represents an input in the form of a drop. So you're dealing with this, you're dealing with that, and soon enough, all of these drops begin to fill your barrel. And the wise thing to do would be to dump some of this out in the form of output by being very intentional in working on self-care and working on developing the resilience that you need to work and decompressing, basically. And so the inputs and the outputs are very important. Unfortunately, because many of us who work in the nonprofit sector are always putting out fires or going from strategy to strategy or implementation of this new idea or implementation of these things and having to think on our feet, unfortunately, those inputs lead to this overflow and that can lead to burnout. So when the barrel is full, any additional input causes the water, the emotions to overflow, and it can lead to burnout. I like to think of it in these terms because it's very easy for me to grasp. And I know when I'm getting too many inputs and I have to be intentional in pouring some of that water out through outputs with regard to my rain barrel and making sure that I'm practicing self-care and processing. And what helps me greatly is to be able to process this with someone who understands things from the same lens that I'm looking at it through. Also, emotional dysregulation can definitely begin to rear its head when we are suffering from compassion fatigue. And so, emotional dysregulation, if you don't know what it means, is a mental health condition that makes it difficult to control our emotions and our reactions. And the symptoms of this are people with emotional dysregulation may experience intense emotions, mood swings, angry outbursts, anxiety, depression, and difficulty coping with their stress. Their reactions may seem disproportionate to the situation. So sometimes when we are experiencing a spell of emotional dysregulation based on how overextended we are, we can begin to feel these emotions more intensely. And let me give you a for instance. I know that when I myself am experiencing emotional dysregulation, things that normally wouldn't bother me, that I could let kind of roll off my back, that I feel like I need to address them or I need to say something about them. So sometimes I think the common term is that you have a very short fuse. And so we need to recognize that and we need to take steps to mitigate having this emotional dysregulation because we know that the impact of emotional dysregulation can interfere with the relationships at work and the communities that we work with at school and in our daily lives. But especially in our relationships, we need to make sure that we are covering that because when we are having problems at school, for example, that's something that's germane to us as individuals. But when emotional dysregulation begins to interfere with relationships, it not only affects you, but it affects the persons that you are interfacing with. And then the causes of emotional dysregulation can be linked to empathy burnout, obviously, and compassion fatigue, but also it can be a symptom of chronic untreated mental health issues. And so I'd like to normalize that we can look at going to see a therapist in the medical model, and the medical model would say that basically you have a problem and therefore you need to go get help. What I would like us to really embrace is the idea of that is a developmental model that all of us, regardless of where we stand with our mental health, we could definitely benefit from talking to someone and processing things with them. And that can mitigate this idea of having untreated medical health or mental health issues. Here are some ideas for mitigating the emotional dysregulation. Number one would be pendulation. It's a coping strategy. And that means turning towards distress in small, manageable chunks. In other words, we may see the big mountain that we have to climb, but we really need to take it one step at a time. There's an axiom in mental health work, and that axiom is that we know that depression resides in the past and anxiety resides in the future. A lot of times, our ruminations about the past cause us to feel this depressive feeling. And then a lot of times, our worries about the what ifs. What if this happens? What if this thing goes wrong? What if I try to implement this and it doesn't work? That brings distress in the form of anxiety in the future. So we need to turn our focus to the now, and we need to focus on the task that is at hand. Also, we know from a plethora of studies that expelling extra energy through exercise can help you to feel better. And then avoiding procrastination because procrastination can lead to guilt and worsen the stress. And then finally, we need to know that therapy and medication together, or therapy on its own, can be a source of empowerment for persons who are needing to manage their emotional dysregulation. So, here are some strategies for managing empathy burnout by creating new neural pathways. And here's what we know about our brain plasticity. Um, we can practice new activities and try new things like traveling or learning a new skill. We need to repeat new behaviors because repeating new activities many times strengthens our neural pathways, our new neural pathways. We have also found that meditation can help us to focus and pay attention and can change the structure of our brain. And a lot of people talk about practicing gratitude, and some even go as far as journaling about the things that they're grateful for, or they even share three things daily with someone that they care about with regard to what they are grateful for. And here's a very, very important one for those of us who are um, directors, well, actually all of us, but definitely those persons who have a large charge over their nonprofit organization, is that we need to practice self-compassion. We need to be kind to ourselves as we work to build new neural pathways. I often share with folks, it's like, if the shoe was on the other foot and I was you and you were me, would you be judging me as harshly as you're judging yourselves? And oftentimes the answer is no, I would show more compassion. Well, we need to practice self-compassion. It is very important to us as human beings, as individuals, but definitely important to those of us who are providing services to those who are in need. Exercise and physical activity can promote neuroplasticity and improve cognitive function. It's important for us to get enough sleep because we know that a lack of sleep decreases neurogenesis, which is the process that allows our brain to repair and to change. We can listen to music. I know that listening to music has been very helpful to me personally. And it doesn't have to be a specific type of music. It can be anything from classical to, metal. As long as it is promoting and improving, promoting a good mood and promoting helping you to establish a good mood, to help you to concentrate better. And it also, we have found that it helps you, provides you with an opportunity to learn and remember more information. A strategy that I like to use a lot is to play online games like chess, Sudoku, or backgammon. I play backgammon quite a lot. These pastimes can help improve neuroplasticity and you can play these games online. I play with people around the world, and you don't have to have a board or you don't have to have someone there at your house. You can play these online. And it's a really good way of improving our concentration and improving neuroplasticity. And this is an important one. We need to be patient because it can take a lot of time to build new habits and break old ones. According to what I read, it can take about 10,000 repetitions to develop a new neural pathway. So don't expect the change to happen overnight, but continue to practice until we can get the achieved effect that we want. We need to build resilience through self-care. I think that's probably the most important point of what I'm sharing here. And self-care can take different forms. And here are three that I think are important and that are recommended. We need to cultivate mindfulness, which means that we need to be present moment aware to manage our stress and maintain perspective. Oftentimes we can physically be somewhere, but emotionally be somewhere else. And that is not being present to the moment. Uh, and a symptom of that is that you don't have any recollection, like what happened there? I know it was there, but I can't really remember. That is a telltale sign that perhaps you are not present to you're not present to the moments and not aware of what is going on in your day to day because you're always thinking. And it's not bad to be forward thinking, but don't get stuck or locked there. Exercise to engage in physical activity to boost mood and energy and overall well-being is another way of building resilience through self-care. Now, exercise doesn't necessarily mean that you've got to go to the gym or that you've got to be lifting weights or working on the machines. Exercise can be taken in the form of taking your dog for a walk, going to the dog park, parking distance from your office and walking there, taking the stairs instead of the elevators. Um, Incorporate movement as much as you can because it really does boost your mood and energy, and it really can contribute to your overall well-being. And then social connection. Uh, Nurture relationships, and this is a really important one. Nurture relationships that help you and seek support from family members and friends and colleagues. I'm going to have a little caveat here. We need to know the relationships that we are entering into. Perhaps that social connection might lead to more stress if the relationship has a structure where you're giving and they're receiving. I think it's important to have social connections where it is equal, where it's reciprocal and it's going back and forth between persons. And usually that is important among those of us who work in nonprofit sectors to find other persons who are working in nonprofit sectors because there's a sharing and a reciprocity that is really important. And so I think that social connection can kill two birds with one stone, as they say, in that you can not only process things with them, but also have a social connection and know that you are not alone in the frustrations and the challenges that you are up against oftentimes. Um, this is important for those of us who are managers in our area. I think it's important for us to recognize that organizational support and prioritizing employee and volunteer well-being through training, supervision, really does create a culture of care. And this is something that I think is really important to the work that we do. I often have shared with the folks that I get to serve with that we can't expect the people, the volunteers, and the folks that are providing services to go out there if we are not mimicking that environment where we are at our home base. And so we need to remember that organizational support on all levels for our employees and for our volunteers is very important. We also should encourage peer relationships that foster a sense of community and mutual understanding among colleagues. It is also important in organizational structures in the nonprofit sectors for there to be buy-in on multiple levels where we all feel that we have a say and that our purview of what we are doing matters to the management, matters to the community. Oftentimes, various folks have different ways of coming at certain situations, challenges, or problems. And I think if there's a forum where we can share this among our peers and among the folks that we work with, I think that that will also contribute to the overall organizational support and a culture of care. And then, of course, boundary setting is very important. We need to establish healthy boundaries to prevent emotional overload and burnout. And this is important because a lot of times we are very good at asking other people to set boundaries, but sometimes we ourselves don't set the boundaries that we need to. There is a time and a place for the important work that we do in the community, but we also have to fall back. We also have to remember that we have families of origin that also need us. We have other relationships outside of our work that need our attention and our care as well. And so when we establish these healthy boundaries where we're not continuing to grind and take some time for that self-care, it really can prevent emotional overload and burnout. I want to talk a little bit about wellness trends in 2026, maybe things that you might want to look into as a just as a human being who wants to do better in their lives and be better. And I certainly need to pay heed to this, physician heal thyself, as they say. So functional lab testing is very popular right now. In the old days when we wanted to get an idea of what we had as far as allergies were concerned, remember they used to do all pick you with like 24 different little pricks so that they could see, what things you were having a reaction to. We've come a long way, and now we do this thing called functional lab testing, and it tells us what our food sensitivities are. Um, it can tell us that we're allergic to something, or it can tell us that we have a sensitivity to that. For example, you can have a food sensitivity towards wheat, but not necessarily have what is that? I can't even remember the name of the disease, celiac disease. So food sensitivities, it can also tell us what our nutrient levels are and where we need to supplement in the form of taking supplements or eating to increase the nutrient levels of the particular things that we are lacking. And then, of course, hormone levels. We need to understand our hormone levels. And man, this isn't just for women. We also have hormones that we need to understand our levels as well. We also have seen there's a lot of folks that are wearing those white discs on their arms. That's a continuous glucose monitor. It's a machine, or I guess it's a machine that they put on their arm, and it's constantly monitoring the glucose level of the person who is wearing that, and it reports it to their phone or their computer. So at any given moment, they can check in to see if their glucose level is high or low, which is important because if you're a diabetic, you don't want it to go high, but it's equally dangerous to be low. And so you need to be in that sweet spot. And so continuous glucose monitoring, which used to be very expensive to do, is now something that is pretty accessible. And it isn't only for persons who have diabetes. There are persons who do continuous glucose monitoring that are not diabetic or are not pre-diabetic and they just are interested in knowing where their glucose levels are. It's kind of knowing what sets your glucose level to go high, what things that you're ingesting are causing your glucose levels to go high. And so that is another trend that a lot of persons are accessing. And then there's personal nutrition programs, oftentimes tied to the functional lab testing to know about our gut health. We were reading a lot these days about the gut health and the microbiome of our gut and its connection to heart well-being, the gut health connection to our brain well-being. And so personal nutrition programs are aimed at developing gut health, which is very important. We also see a lot of wearable technologies that track health. People wear, their iWatch and it tracks their steps. It can also track the oxygen levels. That you can even check your blood pressure with your watch these days. I don't know how accurate these things are, but definitely wearable technologies that track health are very, very in vogue right now. Biohacking. If you're on social media, I'm sure that you've seen a lot of folks doing these cold plunges or this red light therapy where they, in the cold plunges, they fill these containers with ice and water and they plunge themselves in there. And it's supposed to have really good effect on your body. And so that's another trend that's really important that we're seeing a lot of right now. I myself personally loathe cold water, so I don't think that that would really work for me. Or maybe it would if I would be bold enough to get in there. But those cold plunges are definitely something that we're seeing a lot. And my understanding, I may be wrong in this one, my understanding is that it helps with muscle strains, especially if you play sports. These cold plunges help to speed up the healing that you need when you have overtaxed your muscles. And then the idea of microdosing, and I have mushrooms here, the psilocybin, I think it's what it's called, that people are using microdosing for mental and physical health. I've also heard of microdosing in the form of GLPs instead of injecting the whole amount, doing microdosing to help to keep your weight down. I am not advocating for this. I don't know how safe it is, either of these things. I'm just merely reporting that a lot of folks are doing microdosing right now. I would strongly recommend for you to visit a mental health or a physical health provider and talk to them if you're interested in this idea of microdosing. I would definitely not begin to do it on my own without the supervision of a doctor. And then lastly, we're seeing this idea of screen detoxing, which is something that I definitely need to pay attention to. We're seeing that social media like TikTok now has a set limit of time that you're supposed to be on their program, on their platform. And they will send you a message that says you've exceeded your time limit for the day. And you have the choice to ignore it, to stop, or to grant you 50 minutes to just finish up what you're looking at. But screen detox is very important. We also see that there are certain restaurants now that will have a tray in the middle of the table, and everyone is expected to put their phone in the middle so that they can be present to the meal that they're having and the folks that they're with. We're seeing this idea of screen detox at schools where a lot of times the school administration is trying to circumvent a lot of the invasion of privacy that we're seeing at some of the schools. But I also think that they want our children also to perhaps, and this is just my own idea, to put down their screens for a while and be present to the discussions at hand. And so the idea of screen detox is really popular and prominent right now. So I want to land this plane by kind of bringing us back to this idea that the onus is on us. The onus is on us to prevent burnout and fostering compassion. And by understanding the dynamics of emotional capacity, meaning that we need to recognize that we have a finite set of ability with regard to emotional capacity, and implementing strategies for self-care, being intentional and doing and taking time for self-care and providing either if we are in a position to provide organizational support or asking for organizational support, um, we as professionals can prevent burnout and cultivate a sustainable empathy that and compassion in our work. And so, bottom line, layman's terms, summing it up, we need to prevent this idea of negative consequences for the work that we do as empathetic persons. And the way that we do that is by being equally kind and equally intentional in developing the skills that we need to heal ourselves as well. On behalf of the many communities that you work with and the beneficiaries of the services that you provide, I want to say thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing you again on another video.